The years leading up to 1358 saw Peiria chipped away. The last scraps of its treasure and the last drops of its blood wasted, spent on the desperate defense of their wicked realm and the whims of their insane queen. While slaves were being fed datura seeds and set loose on the battlefield to charge aimlessly in their hundreds, like some frothing undead horde, the Serpent Queen ordered thousands of egg-shaped jade stones be fashioned and delivered to her, so she may swallow them, something she had a strange obsession with. While men with black powder barrels strapped to their backs detonated themselves amongst the ranks of enemy knights, the Serpent Queen commanded that a detachment of fine soldiers, not slaves, carry her from place to place. While thousands starved and turned to eating grass and bark as Peiria was hemmed in on every side, the Serpent Queen hosted huge, wasteful, orgiastic banquets, where her and her guests would writhe around on silk beds strewn about the floor, being fed cake and cured meats and cheeses and wine, while they threw their leftovers onto the ground, crushing them beneath their feet as they went from place to place for more food, until the air grew thick with the stinking mass of decadence and decay, the mush piled up to their ankles. Truly, it did not seem as though Vragoi Bersena Dardanora cared much for the office with which she had been entrusted, and so nobody mourned as she was found butchered one morning, her limbs in each corner of the room and her head crackling in the fireplace. With the Vragoi dead and the Bula not trusted to make another decision, the Sirutamun branch abandoned their defense of the northwest and made a mad dash to claim Zolyam for themselves, hoping to unseat their theological enemies. As such, everything broke down, and 1358 became the year of reckoning. Peirian armies receded from every front to Zolyam, some to support the Cashelites and their new vision, some to defend the Bula, which was established in the Second Demonic Council, and some simply because the border was now too thinly guarded, and to guard it with certain death, they were left no other choice than to hole up in Zolyam. Indeed, the League of the Storm Cross essentially waltzed right in. Rhodes turned Peiria into a landlocked country, Swabia and Savacia pushed them out of the north, and Gothonia bore down on them with a perfect hatred. The armies of the Storm Cross, as they advanced, united in one accord for a great siege of Zolyam. But, when they arrived, they saw the city already in flames. The Satanic faithful were tearing each other to shreds, and even more were simply relishing the chaos in the streets. Especially the Denymian cultists, who saw this perfect chaos as an opportunity to sin richly and sin fully. As such, the united force of the League of the Storm Cross, presently united under the leadership of Supreme Inquisitor Militant Lucian Thornheart, acted as a force of law and order more than conquest. They slaughtered all Satanic militants they saw, and the Rhodian Inquisition went to work establishing order in the city by way of the word, the lash, and the gallows. Once the city was deemed sufficiently under control, victory in the Fourth Crusade was declared. And after 45 years of war, peace had finally settled on the continent. Indeed, after 308 years of Satanic Peiria being a constant corrupting force for evil in Europe, their reign of terror had finally come to an end. Not with some great battle, but in confusion and betrayal, in a fashion which confers great shame upon their memory. They did not have their Vragoi, and neither did they have their Bula, or their Kashilla, or the Necraglion, or their Heresiarchs. It was over, and now the work of what came next could really begin. Ultimately, instead of destroying the kingdom of Peiria and partitioning it, and destroying its people, Nicetas I, Bishop of Rhodes, ultimately elected to have a certain measure of mercy upon them. Seeing the Peirians and the Helesians as two orphaned peoples raised outside the light of the church, he took on the paternal role of rehabilitating them. He redrew their borders and reorganized the Satanic kingdom of Peiria into the most serene kingdom of Peirio-Helesia. The Peirians had first targeted their pagan neighbors in their recent campaign of conquest, so the Bishop of Rhodes thought it best to establish a power-sharing system between the two to help the people of Hellas, who had been so unjustly punished, to regain some of their lost power and perhaps to force the Peirians to see them as equals. As such, the kingdom of Peirio-Halesia began its tenure with direct integration with the Rhodian Inquisition. The king chosen to rule was a Christian man of Hellas, King Olinthes Tyrian, who gave the Inquisition full reign and freedom to do as they pleased while he tried to rebuild the land and satisfy a devastated people. He was a wise king, and his Peirian wife, Queen Platorica, tied him directly to the Peirian people as well as his own. It was his goal to foster the identity of Peirio-Halesia as a composite nationality, taking the liberty of blending traditions and Christianizing the parts that didn't quite fit together. For example, in the famed medical schools of Peiria, he ingrained athletic clubs which had long since been the tradition of his people, beginning the tradition of schools having sports teams. This wasn't a perfect system, however. Indeed, many people lambasted the king and what they regarded as his childish idealism. The people of Peiria had relegated the people of Hellas to the station of untouchables, to the point where there was some doubt as to whether the Halesians would continue to exist for even another century. Now, the king sought to paper over that with the blood of Christ, perhaps for the benefit of his Peirian wife. Sectarian ethnic violence was fairly constant, and the two segments of the population were reticent to communicate or integrate. Meanwhile, the Rhodian Inquisition was very much in favor of the people of Hellas, who were enthusiastic converts to Christianity and naturally tortured many Peirians to death, these men who had been raised from the cradle under the auspices of a particular moral system. Tell a Peirian man he could only have one wife and he was likely to strike you. Tell a Peirian man he had to choose one wife to keep and give up the others, and he was likely to maul you. Tell a Peirian he couldn't take and know his slaves in the night, and he was likely to kill you. As such, the Rhodian Inquisition was merciless. The puppet king Olinthes was powerless as the supreme inquisitor militant filled the state administration with Christianized Halesians and carried out a mass purging of satanic elements, even elements which were only suspected of dark involvement. Even left-handed Peirians were caught up in the witch hunt. Indeed, from 1358 to 1368, roughly 5 million men would be apprehended and set to the pyre or the rack or the gallows. Regardless, this wide and merciless net that was cast by the Inquisition ensured that the Temple of the Dragon was completely shattered, and their unholy places burned to cinder. Their surviving members, if there even were any, were driven into hiding, though it was much more likely that they simply disappeared during that great hunt for their kind, and died somewhere else out of sight. The slaves of Peiria were soon emancipated as well, tens of thousands of them becoming loyal wards of the church, only having known service their whole life. Freedom was available to them, but many of them instead chose a kind master to serve, as that dynamic was more familiar. The work of refashioning the region would take generations, but by the will of God, it would happen. Nicetas I, Bishop of Rhodes, then incorporated Armistia and Armenia directly into the territory of Rhodes as semi-autonomous regions, the Bishop of Rhodes now focusing his attentions on properly administering the new client state to their north, the Kingdom of Peirio-Halesia, which was promptly grafted into the League of the Storm Cross. The League, meanwhile, now having claimed their great victory over Peiria, the reason for their existence, were faced with a choice: disband, satisfied with a job well done, or, on the other hand, mark this not as the end, but as the beginning, utilizing the League of the Storm Cross as a civilizational weapon, an unbreakable alliance that had the potential to Christianize the world. The Bishop of Rhodes and the Supreme Inquisitor Militant chose the second option, and, quietly but unilaterally, they turned their gaze to the north, and the vast pagan kingdoms which called those lands their own.